There's a lot of people that are using the fiduciary word as a marketing term, but really has very little as far as backing it up.
You can't operate your business. You can't take commission. You can't take bonuses. I mean, you can, and you can disclose it, but ultimately it's inherently a conflict of interest. Like, it's prohibited transactions all over the place.
If you're managing a retirement plan, if you're managing a health plan, there's certain responsibilities that come with that. And part of that is being able to document your process.
RFP processes have been designed to protect incumbents and to deliver the exact same BS essentially every single year. The system has been working the way it's been working for as long as it's been working because somebody's making a lot of money and it's generally not in the best interest of plan sponsors.
The Business of Benefits is your no BS, no sales guide to real solutions.
No gimmicks, just the truth about how to take control, transform your benefits, and care for your most valuable asset, your people.
If you're tired of the same old sales pitch and you're ready to rethink your benefits, this podcast is for you. The truth is out there. Are you ready to hear it?
Welcome to this week's episode of the Business of Benefits podcast. I'm your host, Chelsea Ryckis, and I have Patrick Williams here with me today, co-founder of Fiduciary in a Box. How are you, Patrick?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Chelsea? It's good to see you again.
Good to see you too. Are those your pups? Are they saying hi too? We used to have, my dog's name is Copious. We used to have Copious on our website as our chief complaint officer. Anyways, we've gotten a little too big where that's not as cute as it used to be. But nonetheless, thank you so much for being here. You and I always have some fantastic conversations, and you've definitely been a trusted resource for me the last few years in the industry. So I'm very honored and excited to have you on the show today.
No, thank you.
I've been getting a lot of inquiries around fiduciary process, and people keep reaching out to me saying like, hey, can you send me that episode you did on fiduciary duty? And can you send me this episode you did on ERISA lawsuits? But as you and I both know, the lawsuit landscape is changing really, really quickly. So I think it's always good to have these conversations, like maybe even quarterly, if not biannually. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to kind of reset on what it means to be a fiduciary, the different tenets of fiduciary duty, settlor versus non-settlor. We'll talk a little bit about some lawsuits. And then I really want to get into what you're seeing as real leverage in the compliance space. So does that all sound good to you?
Sounds great.
All right. So can you update our listeners? And remember, the business of benefit listeners tend to be plan sponsors, mid to large market plan sponsors. So for them specifically, not brokers, not vendors, what does it mean to be a fiduciary? And what are those core tenets?
Yeah, great question. So, the core tenets really focus on an individual that's a fiduciary is putting the interests of the plan participants first. Mm-hmm. And so under ERISA, that means that you're acting solely in their interest with decision making and paying only reasonable expenses. And I know we're going to get into this conversation around reasonable expenses, but following the plan document, where appropriate, and documenting your decisions. The key word here is kind of prudence from the standpoint of ERISA, doesn't require plan sponsors to master perfection. Prudence is basically says that, hey, do you have a prudent process? And they're not measuring what the outcome is. They want to go about and look at what you implemented as far as a process and what you documented along the way in making these decisions. And so for fiduciary, it's really your first foot forward is acting in the best interest of the participants and then following up with process.
Can you explain settlor versus non-settlor function?
Yeah. So settlor functions are functions that are basically business decisions that an organization will make. And this is kind of ties into what we were talking about before we launched, which is, plan design is, a settlor function. Non-settlor functions or fiduciary functions are really dealing with how the employer acts with regards to ERISA and the liability, and basically decisions about operating and administering an existing plan. So the settler function, plan design, doesn't carry the fiduciary liability. What carries the fiduciary liability is the fiduciary functions. Kind of some examples from a settler function standpoint, establishing a new health plan or retirement plan, deciding whether to offer health insurance or 401k, selecting the type of plan, PPO, high deductible, whatever. These are all non-fiduciary type of decisions. But when the decisions start to involve things as far as establishing a committee, holding committee meetings, managing conflicts of interest, vendor oversight, those are all fiduciary functions that employers have to be aware of and bring into their process.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes perfect sense. What do you see as like the biggest hurdle for plan sponsors in understanding that the same prudence that they bring on 401k is now and has always been required on health plans? However, we all know with the CAA, that's really what shone the light and got everybody thinking about this. But what do you see as the biggest hurdle for plan sponsors in actually implementing this and implementing it well?
Yeah. Well, I think that the first thing I see is that employers, when CAA got passed, and we were having early conversations with employers about fiduciary in box as a solution, we quickly realized that we had to have a conversation that, discussed retirement, where we'd say, hey, in your retirement plan, do you have a committee? Yes. Do you get together and perform meetings? Yes. Do you have people that document those meetings? Yes. And all of that work. And basically what we had to explain is under CAA, you now have to do the same thing with your health plan. So you have to have, you should put together a committee. You should be documenting those minutes. You should be reviewing those vendor relationships. You should be reviewing the contracts, the fees arrangement, and get an understanding of what makes up your overall health plan and really get your arms around what the true costs are and the relationships of all those vendors associated with your plan. So it's been a process as far as getting employers to move along. And obviously a lot of the advancement that we've seen, people that are in Fortune 500 companies, they're doing this. But now we've got that push down that's taking place, and we're starting to see a lot of organizations in that 500 to 5,000 size group starting to implement these types of committees and structures and really starting to dive into looking at all of their relationships and really starting to get an arm around how their plans run and what are the costs associated with them and what they can do from a proactive standpoint once they start getting data to make changes that have positive impacts, not only to their participants, but also to the cost of the plan.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always about finding out what's so expensive and then carving it out. Maybe there's some other elements. So for organizations, it's really important to kind of look at this on a broad scope and then narrow in where they can have an impact with whether it's a point solution or making a plan design change or whatever.
Yeah. And sometimes it's not even, and I think you kind of alluded to this, but in my experience, it's not necessarily about adding or removing. A lot of the times too, it's simply just strengthening contract terms of existing vendors. We've seen immense success in that. I wanted to share a quick story. So back in 2016, 2017, I joined Donovan's company, J. Donovan Financial at the time, as a partner. And at the time, he had been doing his registered investment advisory, and a ton of retirement planning and things like that. And he was gradually transitioning over to employee benefits because he was asked by one of his clients to take a look that he had on retirement, to take a look at the health plan. Came in 12% under current, beat out a large publicly traded brokerage, and was like, what the hell is happening on this side of the industry? So that's really like the founding story of how Ethos got into health and welfare exclusively, was just seeing the lack of fiduciary process, right? And I remember when I joined, we had on our website, it was like fiduciary broker, something. And this was probably 2017. And we had met with a vendor at the time. Do you know Chris Yarn with Walk On Clinic? Okay. Well, he's a big personality in the industry, but at the time, like, we were nobody. And he met with us and he was like, you have the word fiduciary on your website. And he was just so stoked about it. And he was like, that's the future, blah, blah, blah. And that's what Donovan had kept telling me. And he was the only other person at that point. And I had taken dozens and dozens of vendor meetings and whatnot that like understood that early on that fiduciary on this side of the business was going to be such a thing. Which brings me to my next point of, and I was going to ask you this later, but let's just get into it because it's going to be a controversial topic. Yeah. Everybody and their mom thinks that they're a fiduciary these days. And like, we literally went from companies having absolutely, and by companies, I mean mostly like brokerages and vendors and whatnot, having no idea about any of this to now everybody is one, has one, like whatever it is from the marketing, right? But like walking the walk is different than talking the talk when it comes to fiduciary duty. So like, what are you seeing in the market? And what should plan sponsors look out for?
Well, there's a lot of people that are using the fiduciary word as a marketing term, but really has very little as far as backing it up. And we've seen that continue to kind of grow and catch momentum. What I see in the marketplace that's happening is there's some people, some organizations like yours and others that come from the consulting side that really are embracing the fiduciary language, the process. I mean, they're immersing themselves, and you're not one of these overnight sensations on LinkedIn. I mean, it's amazing. I can't even go on LinkedIn anymore because everybody's bragging about what they just recently did, and that's never been my position. My position's always been head down, do the work, and just get it done.
Yeah. And how much work are you really doing if you have time to make 3 posts a day?
Right. So some of the things that we're seeing is we're starting to see organizations like accounting and audit firms that are really starting to dive into this because they have relationships with the client, particularly on the retirement plan side, where a lot of accounting firms have TPAs that manage retirement plans, but now they're seeing, whether it's through HIPAA violations or just seeing the need from providing a service to introducing a service as far as consulting with their clients on fiduciary. So it's always, I gave a talk last week in Minneapolis, and I told the people that attended, it was consultants and TPAs, I said, one or all of you are going to step up and start doing this work, but the customer is counting on one of you to do something because the TPA has the next closest relationship to the client, with the consultant obviously being in front of them. So the consultant can decide to jump in, or the TPA can decide to jump in, but somebody's got to take the reins and really run with this thing, because it's getting to a point where customers are getting the knowledge and knowing that they're supposed to be doing this, and they're looking for consultants like you to really lead them down the path. And if you don't do it, you're going to lose the business.
Yeah. And here's what I find to be the most fascinating piece of this conversation is this obviously isn't new, right? Like, we've been talking about this and developing our internal framework and our internal process for well over a decade now, right? So like, our process is tried and true. We've obviously learned and made a lot of mistakes early on that we now don't do and whatever. But there's a bunch of people that are all of a sudden doing this, and just knowing our learning curve, right? And the amount of like work and time and effort that it put in to truly build like a framework and a process. As opposed to just like marketing language on website or LinkedIn. It's your business model needs to reflect a fiduciary standard of care. You can't have a fiduciary advising process for your clients, while at the same time having inherent conflicts of interests and in your business model, right? Like I saw this 2 weeks ago, taking lines of credit from carriers, like obviously per script fill fees that shouldn't be baked in, mistaking per member per month fee was what was really in the contract, but in your disclosure putting per employee per month. So like little things like that, like you can't operate your business, you can't take commission, you can't take bonuses. I mean, you can, and you can disclose it, but ultimately it's inherently a conflict of interest. Like it's prohibited transactions all over the place. So I think like the irony is like, this isn't new. A lot of people brokers specifically haven't embraced it. And I think it's because they have to, show their business model that may or may not be aligned with the best interests of those that they claim to serve. So my hope is that in this push for plan sponsors really wanting advisors to like help them understand this and lift the load a little bit, is that it will force them to do better business. And I'm not saying that brokers are bad or anything like that. Like, I know that they're all very good people, but the system has been working the way it's been working for as long as it's been working because somebody's making a lot of money, and it's generally not in the best interest of plan sponsors.
Yeah. And I think, the one thing we're kind of leaving out is the plan sponsor on this equation. And I kind of look at it from the standpoint that our plan sponsors asking the right questions. Mm-hmm. And I remember being in the consulting business and walking in to an employer and basically saying, hey, give me your plan outline for managing your healthcare costs over the next 3 years. And it typically would be like with the CFO, and they'd look at me like, what are you talking about? What? And, this is kind of what I've, built my business around. But I think that, when we look at plan sponsors, they need to ask deeper questions in order to get to the right person that they need to work with. I mean, it's just a situation where, if we could do a better job at educating plan sponsors and literally giving them the questions that they should ask, I think that that's going to help in providing better outcomes, because right now they're not asking the right questions. I mean, someone's saying they're a fiduciary and they're just like, check.
Yeah. Right. Versus actually looking at the language in the contract. And then if they are a fiduciary, and really that should be like TPA, a repricer, a PBM. When you're looking at these relationships, like, do they also have the insurance to back up those claims?
Exactly.
There's a lot of other things that go into just putting something on paper. The interesting thing is your RFP question, though, because I could not agree more. I think that is like the fundamental problem is RFP processes have been designed to protect incumbents and to deliver the exact same BS essentially every single year. And it really favors large publicly traded brokerages for their market leverage, which means a completely different thing than plan sponsors actually want it to mean, but I digress. So we've been sending out sample RFP questions to groups that we know are in RFP and reaching out to them proactively and just saying, hey, here's an additional 5 questions for you to consider for your RFP. And every single time they've taken them and they've added them. And it's been exactly what we're talking about. Are you willing to give us a contract ahead of time? What is your capacity for fiduciary status? Do you work with vendors? What is your that are only fiduciaries? What is your procurement process? Will you put fees at risk? What does a true multi-year strategy look like? What does data analytics look like? Asking questions that yield better outcomes, right? The most recent one that we just actually won was this gentleman put together the RFP after listening to our podcast with Mark Cuban. And it was everything was about fiduciary, standard of care, fiduciary advising, all of it. They did look at our contract. They looked at our contract prior to engaging with us. They checked out all of our insurances, including fiduciary insurance. It was so incredible. So I think you're right that we have to educate and we have to offer this material up front. Otherwise, they don't know.
Yeah, I think one of the things too, from a positioning with a plan sponsor that I would introduce in my conversations today, if I was in the consulting role, is one that, Mr. Plan Sponsor, you putting together a committee, whether it's for your retirement plan or your health and welfare plan, one of the insurances that you acquire is going to be fiduciary liability coverage. But did you know that the advisor that you're working with from a consulting standpoint on your health and welfare, they don't have fiduciary liability insurance. They have a total separate type of coverage that doesn't even protect them in the event of an ERISA claim. And that's a really big deal. So you have someone that's brokering insurance that isn't protected under a ERISA claim. And that's a problem.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So what do you see as like the aha moment in your experiences for like plan sponsors, like really understanding this?
I think the aha moment comes in a couple different ways. One, a lot of the organizations that utilize our platform, the first thing they say is, wow, this is in depth. The second thing is they say, we thought we were organized, but what we're finding is that we have more gaps than we thought. And, when you think about Fiduciary in a Box, our whole idea is helping you document your process and identifying the gaps and closing those gaps so they don't turn into a hair on fire situation in the event of a DOL audit. So the biggest things that we get as far as feedback from employers is this is in depth. We're glad we did it. And, we thought we were organized and we weren't quite as organized as we thought. Because this information lives everywhere. Up until the point they get to Fiduciary in a Box.
Well, and never mind. I had a conversation with a prospective human resources today, and we were talking about fiduciary obligations and process and due diligence. And she's like, I'm the only person in my organization that knows why we made the decisions we made at renewal last year. And it isn't documented anywhere. And if I were to leave today and they had, and this is a fairly sized organization, like 10,000 plus employees. If I were to leave today, tomorrow, literally nobody would know why any decisions were made for the last 5 years.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I mean, I think Fiduciary in a Box allows you to kind of move those decisions that have been in the head for the longest time and move them up into the platform with the ability to able to recite that story down the road if someone comes to challenge it. And that's the issue, is that you have situations where individuals move from one organization to another. There's an exchange of different consultants, and the plan sponsor is sitting there holding the basket going, how do I put this together? Well, Fiduciary in a Box weaves that story for you.
What I like the most about Fiduciary in a Box in your software is that it doesn't matter if you are you're brand new on the plan sponsor or the vendor side to understanding fiduciary due diligence and process and responsibility, or even with Ethos, right? Because we're a customer. Even with Ethos, we've been talking about fiduciary responsibility. We've been operating under our own fiduciary framework for over a decade, and we still found value in organizing our process, right? And documenting our process. We were talking about this earlier, and I'll throw it in here now. It's like, if you don't have a software or if you don't have a process, like, this is a very easy way to get that process, right? And to at least check the box. To check the box that, like, okay, if we have an audit, like, we have our contracts loaded, we've shown process, good job. But then the difference is, and where you can really like exercise the most out of this, is what is actionable from everything that we've uncovered in these contracts and everything we've uncovered in the data and the trends. Like, what can we do now to actually impact cost and health? And I think that's where it takes a strategic advisor, whether it's the broker that's managing your health plans, whether it's somebody you hire as a consultant, but that's where like the real magic is. But if you don't have, like your ABCs, you're never going to get there. So I think it's awesome and to be able to have both.
Yeah, I mean, you have to build the foundation for the plan sponsor. They have to know what they have first before they can have any sight line down the road. And you, as the consultant, in helping them build out that platform for them, really gives you the tools to be able to say, okay, here's where we're at right now. Now we want to move down this path. You can create the vision for them in moving down that path and taking corrective steps to help meet that goal down the road. I mean, your organization is, with the material that you've built, just outside of Fiduciary in a Box, with how you go about scoring and KPIs. I mean, those are areas within the plan strategy solution within Fiduciary in a Box. But, taking that and really applying that and having some accountability. I mean, you guys are really putting yourself out there from the standpoint of accountability with the client. And it's just great work to see.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. So, kind of fun, but what do you think would make compliance more engaging and more fun, and like really transition us from just this check the box mentality to like, let's actually do something impactful and meaningful with all the crap that we're uncovering in these audits?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we try and make it fun because we built in, gaming into the system a little bit as far as completing different sections and percentage of completion. And we've got some new materials. I'm not going to leak it right now, but we've got some materials that are going to come out that are going to really help you from a consulting standpoint and working with that client and really building out the success of getting towards that end goal of completing the fiduciary process, which of course you start over the next year anyhow. But I think that, from a gaming standpoint, that's important. But at the same time, I guess I'll leak it a little bit. What we've completed that we're going to be launching is this quarterly fiduciary assessment. And what it does is it takes a look at all the documents in the system, what you've done and what's still outstanding. And it actually will review the documents from the standpoint of making sure it's the right document, so that if it's the summary plan description or the SBC, that it's in the right place from that standpoint. It'll also look at governance, and look at the charter and committee members and compile all that information. Basically, what it does is it'll grade the your client as to where they're at. And then it'll put together a 30, 60, 90-day calendar of completion. So you can share that with your client and actually delegate in some cases, because some of the material they might have that you're going to need, but really move them towards completing this fiduciary process and getting that A that everybody, aspires for. From a scoring standpoint. So we're really excited about that because we believe that, consultants, as they continue to interface with their clients and creating that awareness, the client's going to start moving down that path of really completing the process with you in hand.
I love that. That's really neat. It's going to be a lot of fun. If you could ban one phrase from our industry, what would it be?
Well, it's kind of a tie. It's a tie between I don't know and we've always done that this way. And
I thought you meant I don't know as in you don't know the answer, but you're saying when a plan sponsor says I don't know.
Yeah. Well, if I ask you, how did you go about making the decision to work with a specific PBM? I don't know.
No.
Yeah.
We have a 120-page questionnaire that goes out. Somebody on my team better know.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
no, I'm with you. It's actually documented.
I mean, that's just a non-defensible. I just see a potential situation where, that organization is being investigated by the Department of Labor, and your response is, I don't know. And you're the plan sponsor and the fiduciary. That's not a good answer. That's not a way to start off a meeting.
No. Do you have any crazy stories of like conflicts of interest or plan sponsors that have been doing things the same way forever, or like any wild stories to share there?
Yeah, well, I've run into a couple of situations now where plan sponsors, I don't know what the deal is. And this really speaks to what's happening in our marketplace. Again, the transient nature of people. But we have a client now that we're working with that hasn't filed a 5500 in 7 years.
Oh my gosh, those penalties are steep.
Yeah, they're really steep.
That sucks.
And yeah, and that's like the second client that I'm aware of that is in that position. We've got another one that hadn't filed one in 5. We had a situation, we've had situations. I had a situation where I did a demo for a customer, and it was a rather large customer, about 3,000 lives. And they just decided, at this time, we're going to put this on the table and we're not going to move forward. And I said, okay, I'll follow up with you. Well, I didn't need to. 6 months later, they called and they said, we just got a letter from the DOL for an audit. Is there any way that you can help us get this information loaded into the system? And we said, yes, we can. And so we got the information loaded into the system and they populated it as best as possible. And then we basically turned on the ability for the auditor to come in and look at the system and evaluate the docs. Yeah. And so up until this point, I haven't heard of any fine associated with that particular client yet. So cross your fingers.
Yeah, I know. It's definitely one of those things where it's like a lot of people think it's just like hearsay or a story about somebody else, right? But
yeah. I think what's really concerning to me is that people, whether they know it or not, if you're managing a retirement plan, if you're managing a health plan, there's certain responsibilities that come with that. And part of that is being able to document your process. That should be really clear to everybody. Hey, whether you're using a yellow pad, or a checklist, I don't care. But you need to be able to document your process. And in the event of an audit, you got to be able to count on that as your defense. And my only question is, are you going to put all of your weight on a checklist or a notepad or some notes that you put in the system?
Or your broker even, right? Like, our broker told us this was the best option. Like you can't delegate that. You really can't.
You can't.
So a couple of tangible takeaways for listeners, and then we'll get close to wrapping up the combo. But if you don't have something like Fiduciary in a Box or an advisor with this really solid framework, and hopefully it's both, for advising on all of the things that you're about to uncover with your Fiduciary in a Box process, here's some things you can do in terms of documenting your process. So having a solid RFP that actually includes some of those earlier questions, asking to see contracts ahead of time so you don't get to a finalist situation and both of them are actually full of BS, right? And then now you've made the worst decision that you could have possibly made. So look at contracts first before you even engage. Ask for conflicts of interest, ask for how they're paid, what's the compensation structure up front, and ask their take on fiduciary status, committee governance, as well as how they're going to just ensure compliance across the board. And their process for how they're bringing you vendors, right? So if you're going to have your consultant go out and do a TPA RFP for you, what is their due diligence process like? Because ultimately, it's your due diligence process at the end of the day. So that's number one, would be having more solid questions like you mentioned earlier, Patrick. Number two would be having a scorecard, not for specifically for selection. So if you're in the RFP process, having a scorecard that you can use for every single finalist meeting that you have, that it's consistent, and then you can save those, right? From there, when you go through kickoffs for open enrollment and logistics and contributions, plan design, all the decisions that have to be made, having a fiduciary summary. So we include this in our post-enrollment materials. It's literally typed out. These are the exact decisions that were made. These are all the markets that we went to. This is why this company chose to do X, Y, Z. And we take all of the information from the entire renewal process and have this summary created that we then send to the plan sponsor to sign off on. That goes in Fiduciary in a box. And then when you have your vendors, then you have vendor monitoring on at least a monthly or if not quarterly basis, where you're sending a scorecard to the plan sponsor, to the account management team. Everybody's ranking these vendors. Do they have performance guarantees that they're holding up? How are their service level arrangements like? Are they responding on time? What's their data access like? Are they meeting their fiduciary capacity that they told us they would? And then you're having those fiduciary committee meetings. So those are some easy takeaways now that you can try to implement into your process if you don't have anything like this.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I've known about your scoring and what you're doing as far as your KPIs with the vendors. And I just wish that everybody that practiced in this space kind of held it in the same vein as you do. And just, I'm admired by what you guys have done and taken this. And I want you to keep on pushing the envelope. I want you to know that when I'm out there speaking, I get questions about organizations that are using our platform. You're the first one that I go to. And a lot of times they've heard about you already. But, if you want to model somebody, go look at what Ethos Benefits is doing.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Well, your platform makes it a heck of a lot easier than it used to be for us. I'll tell you that much. Organizing all of that stuff, it was like a little spider web, and now it's all beautiful and pretty and easy. So thank you for that. What would be your takeaway, the last thing that you would say to plan sponsors listening to our episode today?
I think that, take the time to kind of digest what's been said. Take a look at what your current situation is. Have you established the committee? What have you done? If you haven't done anything, you're just operating on a renewal basis, that's not the right path to take. I mean, this has got to be actively managed. It's not just getting together for a pre-renewal meeting and then a renewal meeting and then enrollment. It's so much more than that. And employers need to get a little more active and just kind of lean into this. And if they're not working with the right person or if they have questions, give Chelsea a call.
Thanks. And hey, also we didn't talk about this a lot, but the materials in Fiduciary in a Box, like the takeaway materials, they've just been getting better and better and better. And oftentimes that will be materials that I send out to prospects that reach out or they listen to podcasts like this. So if you're listening and you want to see a sample of different materials that you could get your hands on, if you were to utilize something like Fiduciary in a Box, give me a shout and I will provide that for you as well. But Patrick, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Chelsea.
Where can our listeners find you?
Well, we're on the web, www.fiduciaryinabox.com, and you can click in to the web there and schedule a demo if you want to, or you can pick up the phone and just give us a call. We'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here today. And to our listeners, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next time on The Business of Benefits.
Thanks, Chelsea.